Welcome to an era where ambition went too far. These tractors were built smarter, bigger, and more complex than the world was ready for. Too advanced, too expensive, too risky. They didn't just fail in fields, they nearly broke the brands behind them. This isn't innovation, it's disaster in steel. Number 1. International Harvester 5488, 1981. The International Harvester 5488, introduced in 1981, was meant to represent the future of IH tractors. It sat at the top of the new 50 series, carrying modern styling, higher horsepower, updated drivetrains, and a long list of integrated systems that reflected how seriously IH wanted to compete with John Deere and Case. On paper, it was exactly what large farms were asking for: more power, better ergonomics, and a platform designed for heavy fieldwork in an era of expanding acreage. The problem was timing. When the 5488 reached dealers, International Harvester was already in deep financial trouble. The company had suffered massive losses at the end of the 1970s, endured a devastating labor strike, and entered the 1980s burdened by debt. Developing an all-new flagship tractor line under those conditions was extraordinarily risky. A tractor like the 5488 was not cheap to design or support. It required new tooling, extensive dealer training, and a reliable parts network, exactly the infrastructure that becomes fragile when a company is fighting for survival. The 5488 itself was not a bad tractor. Many examples still work today. What made it dangerous was the scale of the investment behind it. A flagship tractor is a statement. It tells the market that the company intends to lead the future. But that leadership requires long-term stability. IH did not have that luxury. Within just a few years, International Harvester sold its agricultural division, and the brand ceased to exist as an independent tractor maker. This is what makes the 5488 overengineered in historical context. It was built with the expectations of a healthy, forward-looking company, but it emerged from one that was financially wounded. Every complex system inside it, every new casting, every proprietary component represented cost and long-term obligation. When IH collapsed, owners of these tractors suddenly belonged to a brand that no longer existed. The 5488, therefore, became a symbol of ambition colliding with reality. It embodied what IH wanted to be in the 1980s, not what it could afford to be. The tractor did not destroy International Harvester, but it was part of a final push that drained resources at the worst possible moment. In hindsight, it stands as a powerful reminder that even excellent machines can become liabilities when the company behind them is already falling. Number 2. International Harvester 3688, 1981. The IH 3688 arrived alongside the 50 series as part of International Harvester's last great design overhaul. It featured bold styling, an integrated cab, and a layout that clearly aimed to modernize the brand's entire tractor identity. These machines were meant to show that IH was not stuck in the past, that it could innovate and lead in the new decade. From an engineering perspective, this was a heavy lift. A full redesign touches everything: frame geometry, driveline packaging, cooling systems, electrical routing, cab mounting, and service access. That level of change requires years of development, and more importantly, years of stable production afterward to justify the cost. IH entered this process just as its financial foundation was cracking. The early 1980s were unforgiving. The farm economy collapsed, equipment sales fell, and interest rates surged. International Harvester was already struggling under debt and operational disruption. Launching a radically new tractor family in that environment meant absorbing enormous upfront cost with no guarantee of recovery. The 3688 itself became part of a strange historical moment. It was a new generation tractor from a company that would soon no longer exist. Owners purchased modern machines wearing IH red, only to see the brand disappear within a few years. Support shifted to the newly formed Case IH network, and the tractors became mechanical bridges between two corporate identities. That is why the 3688 fits the theme of overengineering. It was not flawed in concept, it was flawed in context. It required the kind of corporate stability that IH no longer possessed. Every redesign decision assumed a future of continuous improvement and long-term production. Instead, the company entered liquidation and restructuring. The tractor therefore stands as a case study in how innovation can become dangerous when the business behind it is fragile. In a healthy decade, the 3688 might have been the first chapter of a long lineage. In the 1980s, it became a final chapter, evidence of how far IH was willing to reach even as the ground disappeared beneath it. Number 3. International Harvester 3788 2+2 Series. The IH 3788, part of the famous 2+2 family, remains one of the most unusual tractor designs ever sold by a major manufacturer. Neither fully articulated nor conventionally framed, the 2+2 layout placed the engine ahead of the operator while retaining row crop capabilities. It was a hybrid concept, part big field tractor, part precision row machine. From an engineering standpoint, the 2+2 was ambitious. It required unique driveline geometry, specialized frames, and a layout unlike anything most dealers or mechanics had seen. That alone increased development and support costs. In a strong economy, a company can afford to refine such a design over time. In the early 1980s, IH could not. By the time the 3788 appeared, International Harvester was already losing massive amounts of money. The company was fighting to keep factories running, renegotiating debt, and selling off divisions. Maintaining a mechanically unconventional tractor family under those conditions was extremely risky. Every design quirk meant additional service bulletins, parts stocking complexity, and dealer education. The 2+2 concept was not a failure. Many operators appreciated its traction and versatility, but it demanded patience, refinement, and long-term corporate commitment. IH did not have that time. The company's collapse froze the evolution of the platform, leaving the tractors as technical orphans, advanced, distinctive, and permanently unfinished. This is why the 3788 belongs in this list. It represents a moment when engineering vision exceeded business reality. The tractor assumed a future in which IH could continue improving and supporting an unconventional architecture. Instead, the brand vanished. The 3788 became a monument to boldness in the wrong decade. It was not too strange. It was too ambitious for a company already bleeding. In another era, it might have evolved into a new tractor class. In the 1980s, it became a fascinating dead end. Number 4. Allis-Chalmers 870. The Allis-Chalmers 870 was the flagship of the company's 8000 series, introduced in the early 1980s. It featured modern styling, a new cab environment, and horsepower levels intended to keep Allis competitive in large-scale agriculture. On the surface, it looked like a confident step forward. Behind the scenes, Allis-Chalmers was running out of capital. The company had struggled for years, and by the mid-1980s, it would sell its farm equipment division entirely. The 870 was therefore launched in the narrow window between ambition and collapse. A tractor like the 870 is expensive by nature. Flagships require unique components, higher-duty drivetrains, and premium features. They also demand marketing, dealer investment, and long-term production to recover development cost. Allis was attempting this at a time when the farm market was shrinking and its own finances were deteriorating. The machine itself was not reckless. What was reckless was the situation. The 870 assumed continuity, years of refinement, upgrades, and market presence. Instead, Allis-Chalmers exited agriculture only a few years later. Owners suddenly found themselves with tractors from a brand that no longer existed. The 870 became part of a vanishing lineage. It represented what Allis wanted to be in the 1980s: modern, competitive, relevant. But the company lacked the runway to make that future real. In hindsight, the tractor was not too advanced. It was introduced by a company too weak to sustain it. That is the essence of overengineering in this era. Not technical excess, but strategic mismatch between ambition and survival. Number 5. Massey-Ferguson 4880. The Massey-Ferguson 4880, introduced in the early 1980s, was a massive articulated tractor aimed at the largest farming operations. It embodied power, scale, and industrial ambition. These machines were built for wide implements, deep tillage, and non-stop fieldwork, exactly what modern agriculture would eventually demand. Yet Massey-Ferguson entered the 1980s in severe financial distress. The company carried enormous debt and required government intervention to survive. Every major product launch during this period was a gamble, and nothing is more expensive to design and support than high-horsepower articulated tractors. Big tractors require heavy frames, complex drivetrains, and robust cooling and hydraulic systems. They also require a support network capable of servicing machines that work at the edge of mechanical limits. Massey was attempting this while fighting for its own existence. The 4880 itself symbolized confidence in a future Massey could barely afford. It assumed a company able to iterate, expand, and invest. Instead, Massey spent the decade restructuring and downsizing. The tractor became part of a portfolio built under emergency conditions. That is why the 4880 fits this list. It was not unreliable. It was dangerous to build under those circumstances. It represented capital intensity in an era when capital was scarce. It was big iron in a decade that punished big bets. The tractor did not cause Massey's crisis, but it illustrates the central tragedy of the 19th. Manufacturers were forced to choose between stagnation and risk. Massey chose ambition. The cost was survival itself. Number 6. Ford FW60, 1977 to 1981. The Ford FW60 was the most extreme expression of Ford's brief but dramatic push into the high-horsepower articulated tractor market. Built in the late 1970s, it was massive, expensive, and far outside what most people associated with the Ford name. This was a company famous for row-crop tractors suddenly trying to compete with Steiger, Versatile, and Case in the big iron arena. From an engineering perspective, the FW60 was serious machinery. It featured a heavy articulated frame, massive axles, and a drivetrain designed for non-stop deep tillage on huge acreage. It wasn't experimental, it was industrial. Ford invested heavily in this platform, believing that large-scale farming would continue expanding and that Ford could become a dominant force in the high-horsepower class. But the timing was brutal. By the early 1980s, the farm economy collapsed, credit dried up, commodity prices fell. Demand for giant four-wheel drive tractors evaporated. These were the first machines farmers stopped buying. The FW60 suddenly became a flagship without a market. For Ford, this was dangerous. High-horsepower articulated tractors are capital-intensive to design and build. They require unique frames, drivetrains, and manufacturing infrastructure. Unlike smaller tractors, they cannot be repurposed easily or sold in volume during downturns. Every unsold unit ties up enormous money. The FW60 assumed growth. It assumed stability. It assumed that Ford could remain committed to this class for decades. Instead, Ford exited the agricultural equipment business entirely in 1986, selling it to Fiat. The articulated tractor program vanished. The FW60 became an orphan of a strategy that the company could not sustain. That is what makes it over-engineered in historical context. The tractor was not too complex for its job, it was too ambitious for its maker's future. It was built as if Ford's place in agriculture were permanent. It was released into a decade that erased that certainty. The FW60 stands as proof that even giants can misjudge timing. It was big, powerful, and capable, but it belonged to a future that never arrived for Ford. Number 7. Steiger Panther III. The Steiger Panther III represented the peak of Steiger's classic articulated tractor philosophy in the early 1980s. Steiger built its reputation on massive four-wheel drive machines designed for the toughest work on the largest farms. The Panther III embodied that identity, rugged, powerful, and unapologetically industrial. Yet Steiger entered the 1980s facing the same brutal reality as the rest of the industry, only magnified by its specialization. When the farm economy collapsed, demand for ultra-high horsepower tractors fell sharply. These machines are luxury tools in hard times. Farms postpone their purchase, stretch the life of older equipment, and reduce capital spending. For Steiger, that was catastrophic. Production dropped dramatically. Fixed costs remained. The company entered Chapter 11 and was eventually acquired. The Panther III became part of a lineage that the original Steiger company could no longer sustain. High-horsepower articulated tractors are inherently expensive. Their frames, axles, transmissions, and drivetrains are built for punishment. That durability is an asset when sales are strong. It becomes a burden when sales collapse. Each unit represents a large capital investment, and slow turnover can cripple cash flow. The Panther III therefore illustrates how over-engineering becomes dangerous in the wrong decade. The tractor itself was exactly what large farms needed. The market simply could not absorb it. Steiger's identity was built around machines like this, leaving the company with little flexibility when the world changed. The Panther III did not destroy Steiger, the economy did. But it shows how a brand centered on extreme capability can be uniquely vulnerable when conditions reverse. What once made Steiger powerful became a liability. The Panther III stands as a monument to that tension, a machine perfectly engineered for a world that temporarily vanished. Number 8. Versatile 1150. The Versatile 1150 represented one of the most powerful tractors of its era. It was the embodiment of Versatile's philosophy: enormous horsepower, massive frames, and the ability to pull implements that few other machines could handle. In technical terms, it was impressive. In business terms, it was a gamble. Versatile thrived in the 1970s by serving the high-horsepower niche, but the 1980s farm crisis hit that niche hardest. When credit tightened and commodity prices fell, farms stopped buying the biggest machines first. Sales plunged. Versatile's financial position deteriorated rapidly, leading to bankruptcy and eventual acquisition. The 1150 symbolized everything that made Versatile great and everything that made it vulnerable. Extreme tractors require extreme investment. They are not incremental products. They demand specialized manufacturing, heavy components, and a market willing to spend heavily. Launching such a tractor in the mid-1980s assumed that large farms would continue expanding and investing. Instead, many were simply trying to survive. The machine became a flagship without a fleet. This is why the 1150 fits the theme. It was not too powerful, it was too ambitious for its moment. It represented a future that arrived later than expected. Versatile built a tractor for a world that would exist again, but not yet. The company did not have the time or capital to wait. Ownership changed. The original Versatile era ended. The 1150 became part of a story where engineering brilliance collided with economic reality. Number 9. White 4-2-10. The White 4-2-10-10 emerged from a brand already destabilized by corporate crisis. White Motor Company entered bankruptcy in 1980, and White Farm Equipment was sold during the turmoil. Tractors like the 4-2-10 existed in an environment of uncertainty, new ownership, shifting strategies, and fragile dealer networks. The 4-2-10-10 was a serious four-wheel drive tractor aimed at the same market as Steiger and Versatile. It required heavy frames, powerful drivetrains, and extensive support. Under stable ownership, such a machine can be refined and improved over time. Under bankruptcy conditions, even maintaining continuity becomes difficult. Overengineering in this context means something different. It is not about technical excess. It is about launching a complex, capital-intensive product while the company itself is being dismantled and rebuilt. The tractor assumes a future that the organization cannot guarantee. Owners of these machines often found themselves navigating brand transitions, parts pipeline changes, and shifting dealer arrangements. The tractor outlived the structure that created it. That is a dangerous mismatch between machine lifespan and corporate lifespan. The 4-2-10 therefore represents a deeper risk of the 1980s. When brands fracture, complex machines become orphans. Even a well-designed tractor becomes harder to support. The danger is not mechanical, it is institutional. Number 10. The Case 2590. The Case 2590 was a heavyweight tractor from a company fighting to remain competitive against industry giants. Case entered the 1980s under intense pressure. Sales declined sharply, and leadership committed massive capital in an attempt to survive, culminating in the acquisition of International Harvester's agricultural business. A tractor like the 2590 represented confidence in that strategy. It was built to compete at the top end of the market, where margins are thin and expectations are high. These machines require long product cycles and constant refinement, yet Case's future was uncertain. The company was betting billions on survival. Every major tractor program carried existential risk. If the strategy failed, these machines would become relics of a brand that could not continue alone. The 2590 illustrates how even established manufacturers felt the edge of collapse. Overengineering here means building as if stability were assured when it was not. Case survived, but only through dramatic transformation. The lesson of these tractors is not that ambition is wrong. It is that timing is everything. In the 1980s, the margin for error vanished. Machines built for growth were released into contraction. The tractors endured. Their makers often did not. They were bold, they were brilliant, and they were dangerous to their own makers. These tractors proved one hard truth: engineering without limits can destroy empires. History doesn't just honor success, it remembers the risks that went too far.